Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to talk through all my recent reads from January and February. I don't know if I want to do monthly wrap-ups on this channel, but I thought if I do, we'll start with January and February in one video. I anticipate this video being quite long as we have 17 books to get through. So get cozy, grab a drink. I have an iced coffee. And yeah, let's start with the books I read in January. Because there are quite a few books to get through in this, and also I read some of these 2 months ago. I think I'm just going to do quick fire reviews. I am hoping to start doing more thorough written reviews on Goodreads or Storygraph. If you want more in-depth reviews, be sure to follow me on there. But the first book I read in January was The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle, Elle, Jensen, and I have this gorgeous Fairy Loot edition here. This was a really fun fantasy romance that follows Lara, who is our main character, and she was raised to believe that the Bridge Kingdom is her enemy and that she will be the one to destroy the kingdom. And essentially all her life she has been trained to destroy the Bridge Kingdom. However, when she eventually gets to the Bridge Kingdom, she starts to uncover that a lot of the truths she's been told aren't to be trusted. I had a really great time with this. I really liked the setting of this book, especially. That was one of my favourite parts. And I loved the characters that we were introduced to throughout. And I was just really rooting for Lara throughout. You get a really good sense of her character and you get really connected to her almost straight away. So I'm really excited to read the second one of this. I think it's a 6-book series, but every 2 books follows a different couple. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what this is. I then read The Deal and the Mistake by Elle Kennedy. I also have my notes on my laptop, so if I look down quite often, that's why. I apologise. As I said, I don't remember much about what I read. I read these 2 books because I was craving a fun ice hockey romance, and that is exactly what I got. I had a great time with The Deal. It was really fun, fast-paced, and full of the drama I wanted. I will say, though, with The Deal, I found it a little bit insta-lovey, but what do you expect, sort of, when you read those sort of books? However, I was not too fond of The Mistake nearly as much, and something I've nearly DNF'd it at like 60%, I think, or maybe 70. But I was like, no, just push through, because I was having fun with some parts of it, and then literally like 10% after I decided not to DNF it, something really triggered me in this book, which I wasn't expecting, and it just sort of ruined the enjoyment that I was having with it. I think I will continue the series just because they are really fun, and ice hockey romance, one of my favourites. The one thing that I didn't like in either of these was the epilogues. I don't know if it's just me, but I do not want to see what their lives are like 10 years into the future when they've only really like become an established couple 2 to 3 chapters before the end. I don't know. I just don't like when that happens in romance books. The book I read in January was A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This is the final installment in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, and I was very disappointed with this. This was one of my most anticipated reads last year, but I really wasn't in a great reading mood last year, so I didn't get round to it. And then a lot of mixed reviews came through, and I sort of anticipated this not being my favourite just because in the second book, I really didn't like the ending and the plot twist we had. I just did not like that trope, I guess. So I knew this wouldn't be a favourite because obviously it's a follow on from that ending. But for a story about that's essentially a romance between Jax and Evangeline, we didn't get a lot of them in this. We got a lot of Apollo, which I probably should have expected, but I just really don't like his character. Yeah, as I said, I didn't like the ending of the second book, so I was hesitant to read this one. So maybe that impacted some of my enjoyment with this as well. Um, yeah, I just really didn't like this one, and I'm actually quite sad because I love the Caraval trilogy by Stephanie Garber, and I was hoping to love this series just as much, but it's probably averaged at around a 3-star series for me rather than a 5-star series. However, I know a lot of people have loved this book and love the ending it has. So I do just think it sort of depends on what tropes you like in books. And sadly, just where this one went just wasn't for me. I then read Maurice and Maralyn by Sophie Elmhurst. I was kindly sent an e-arc of this from the publisher. And before reading this, I had not heard of Maurice and Maralyn and their shipwreck journey. It is a non-fiction book, sort of retelling the lives of these people. And it's a great story of resilience and love. It's told in 3 parts, and we follow Maurice and Maralyn as they meet at the early stage of their life and fall in love. And they decide that conforming to a conventional land based life with all these societal expectations of jobs, children, house, everything like that, it just wasn't for them. So they then decide to live their lives on a boat sailing around the world with set destinations in mind. And they become shipwrecked and have to survive on a raft with no working flares to signal help and little to no food or water. What I really liked about how this was told is how you see Maurice and Maralyn's roles reverse compared to the roles that they had on the boat. Yeah, it was a fast-paced, enjoyable book that really highlights their unlikely survival. I can't remember how long it was, but I think they were shipwrecked for 4 or 5 months before anyone found them. And yet, it just really focuses on the emotions and feelings that make up your human life. But yeah, that has been published now, so if you want to read it, you are able to get your hands on it. Then read Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. One of my favourite books I've read so far this year, and just one of my favourite books ever. I absolutely loved this book, and as a lover of Ninth House, I was so worried that I wouldn't love this or it wouldn't live up to the expectations that I had, because it has been a long time in between when the first one was published. So when this was published, it had been about 4 years since Ninth House was published. So as just a lover of that book and highly anticipating this one, it was a bit nerve-wracking to go into it. But I absolutely loved it. It follows on from the events of Ninth House, and it's even more dark and twisted, and it has those horror elements in there which are just amazing. And I feel like in this one we are introduced to a lot more like fantasy creatures or fantasy creatures and elements that the first book was building up to. And Darlington is even better, personally, in this book than in the first. Demon Darlington, Devil Darlington. If you know, you know. Loved this book. Then the final book I read in January was Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. This is the first book that follows Daisy, and I have to say I do love her character a lot more than Magnolia. So this is the continuation in the series of Magnolia Parks. Books are very character driven and explore the flaws and relationships in this group of high society people in London. If you've not heard of this book before, it's essentially Gossip Girl but set in London. And it's fun. Some things I did like about this is that it was set at the same time as the first Magnolia Parks book. So we see how characters mentioned in that book are feeling in those events that happened in this book, if that makes sense. I don't know if what I've just said does actually make any sense. There is some lovely writing in here. I wasn't going to annotate it, but I ended up tabbing it, as you can see. Yeah, however, I just felt it was too long and it dragged out a little bit, and I just wasn't interested towards the end. Like, you can see where I stopped tabbing just because I was just bored, unfortunately. I personally have decided to not continue the series. Whilst there's a lot of aspects that I enjoy, the constant miscommunication, the constant back and forth, I just really don't get on with it, and I get frustrated and then I just stop caring. This is a tricky one because, especially in Magnolia Parks, I think the first book, they aren't meant to be likable characters, but you sort of delve beneath the surface level of the characterization and you grow to love them. But I just haven't, unfortunately. I won't be continuing this series. Okay, so that's January all wrapped up. Let's move on to February. So February was a great reading month for me. I read 10 books, which is, I think, the most I've read in a month, especially in a long time anyway. And a lot of them were between 4 and 5 stars. So I'm really happy with the books that I read in February. The first of which was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I absolutely adored this book, and although I've not been mentioning star ratings in this wrap up, I gave this a 4.5, but I actually think it should be a 5 because I haven't stopped thinking about it and how much I just love it. In this, we follow Tova, who works the night shift at an aquarium, and one night she notices Marcellus, a giant Pacific octopus, is missing from his tank. And from that night, they sort of create this weird friendship. And it's what Tova really needs. So she's gone through losing her son when he was only 18, I think, and then she's recently lost her husband as well. So she just really needs this comfort and friendship that she manages to form with the octopus. The writing in this just has so much emotion and reflection, and it really had me gripped. And although the ending was predictable, actually, I don't know about that. It was predictable, yes, but I feel like um, we are fed parts of the story, so we know what the conclusion is, in order to just really be filled with emotion when Tova realizes what's going on, what the ending is. So yeah, it is predictable, but I think it's predictable for a reason. And I just had a really great time reading this. And something that I really love in books, which this had, is when you follow two different characters whose lives are completely different, and then for some reason they intertwine, and then they meet, and you get those chapters with them meeting as well. And yeah, I won't say too much about that because it would be spoilers, but I just adored this book, and I would highly recommend. So the next book I read in February was The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon. This, first of all, is a beautiful book. I buddy read this with my sister Sean, and it was such a great experience. We both really loved this book. So this is a fantasy that really has a focus on light versus dark, and it is full of world building. It's very much purple prose, so if you don't like that, you might not like this. Having said that, I didn't think I was a fan of purple prose, but I adored this book, so maybe I am. Maybe my tastes have changed. Even though you've got all that world building and lyrical writing, the plot just keeps on moving at such a great pace that you just get so wrapped up in this world and what's going on. It is a fantasy romance, and it has enemies to lovers. It has an arranged marriage, but also a marriage of convenience. And let me tell you, the romance had us both so invested and frustrated at the same time, because this is a proper enemies to lovers. Within like the last 100 pages, do you get that hint of romance? And it is quite strong, but then the enemies just, it's very back and forth, but I loved it. I ate this up, and I'm so excited for the second book to be released later this year and to read that. And I'm really excited to see how the author's writing will develop, because this was a debut novel, and I think for a debut novel it was amazing. I then read these 3 books that were mentioned in my reading pink books for Valentine's Day vlog. So if you want more in-depth thoughts on these, please go and check that out. I'm really happy with how that vlog turned out, and sort of happy with the books I read. The first of which was Annihilation by VanderMeer. This was my first step into the speculative sci-fi fiction world, and it did not disappoint. This book was an unexpected new favourite for me. I loved the themes in this. We had themes of human versus non-human, environmentalism, ecology, and it also had unreliable narration, which is a favourite of mine. Any books that has that, I'm probably going to love. I just absolutely loved this one, and I'm really, really excited to continue this series. The next book for that video I read was Wildfire by Hannah Grace. After reading and loving Icebreaker, I had high hopes for this one, but unfortunately it fell a bit flat for me. I just wasn't connected to the characters, so therefore I wasn't really invested in the romance. It has some great topics and discussions on family issues and identity, but those discussions were so repetitive that it ended up feeling a bit boring. And I have learned not to read epilogues in romance books, as I don't want to know what they're up to 10 years from now, especially in this one. Like, it was, they had pretty much just officially gotten together like 2 chapters before, and then it was like, here they are 10 years from now. I really don't like it. So I think when I read Hendek's book, because it's Henry's book, which I'm really looking forward to, I just know not to read the epilogue and pretend it doesn't exist. I then read Sex and Rage by Eve Babitz. This was my first Babitz, and whilst it did have some beautiful quotes, again, it fell very flat for me. This was recommended to me as for fans of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And whilst I see why it just didn't have the vibes that I wanted from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That was all missing from here for me. I actually don't remember much of my thoughts on this. So again, if you are interested and would like to have more in-depth thoughts from me on this, check out my Reading Pink Books blog. I will try Babitz again because there, as I said, there are some beautiful quotes in here. But I am in no rush. The next book I read in February was Daphne by Josh Mallerman. I'm slowly delving into the horror genre and I absolutely loved this one. Personally, I think this was a fantastic narrative on anxiety and how it manifests itself. And this discussion theme is set to the legend of Daphne, who appears and kills the more you think of her. I also think the setting of a small town was really clever in this book, as it gives a sense of claustrophobia in the fact that you can't escape Daphne. Definitely check trigger warnings for this one if you want to read it. I really loved it, but I know it's got some mixed opinions on it. I then read Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams, and this is a contemporary novel with themes of identity, mental health, race, and even like sexuality and sexual freedom. I think it was a really great book, and it managed to have this discussion on those themes whilst keeping it quite humorous and enjoyable. I audiobooked this one, and I think I maybe would have enjoyed it more if I physically read it rather than listened to it. However, it still was really enjoyable. Near the end, we've got 3 books to go. So I then read Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I'm getting really uncomfortable. So I then read Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, and I'm finally continuing the Throne of Glass series, and I am so happy about it. I really loved this installment. I felt like it did a really great job of shifting the tone from the first 3 and to change that tone to set up to the next few books in this series, because I felt like there's a big shift. And having read Queen of Shadows now as well, there is definitely a shift in the tone and some darker themes, darker elements to these books than we've seen so far. I loved seeing Selena's development in this and her relationship with Rowan. I love Rowan's character so much. I think from what I've heard, I have a feeling this book is where people start to not like Cole, whatever his name is. I still like him, and I still like him having read Queen of Shadows, but I do understand why people don't or no longer like him. But yeah, I really loved this. Really enjoyed it, and I'm so excited to finish this series. I've got 3 books left now, and I can't wait. The penultimate book that I read in February was The Trees Grew Because I Bled There by Eric LaRocca. This was my first LaRocca, and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. This was or is some really gory horror short stories in which we can find themes of grief, love, and obsession. I'm not going to say too much on that because I do actually have a reading horror books vlog coming soon. But I was really surprised with this one. Actually, when I was reading it, I'm currently obsessed with Criminal Minds, like really obsessed with it. And some of the short stories that were in this book, I felt like could have been storylines in one of the episodes, so I found that really fun. And I was thinking of like, there was one in particular, I can't remember which story it was, but it was about these parents in a park and with their babies. If you know, you know. I don't want to spoil it, but that one I was thinking of like, oh, how would they profile this? How would they do this? And that was just a really fun element for me, but obviously that's not what it was. I just thought I'd add that in because I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I'm definitely going to read more of his work. I actually really can't wait to get my hands on another of his books. The final book that I read was Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. I'm really struggling to say that. This was a fun and enjoyable read for me. However, I went into this thinking it was pure horror. Personally, I would say it's a paranormal contemporary novel with horror aspects. And because there is a romance in this as well, it definitely, for me anyway, leans itself to the paranormal fiction side of horror, I guess. But the author did a really great job of portraying female rage and providing commentary on body image, some really important themes again woven into this book. And I would say if you were to read this one, definitely check the trigger warnings again. It was fun, it was enjoyable, just not what I wanted from it personally. So there we have it, guys. That's all 17 books that I've read in January and February. Really happy actually with the selection of books that I've read. I think there's a real mix, and I'm trying to broaden what books I do read. And most of these were from my shelves or on my Kindle or the library. None of these actually were bought this year, the ones that I do own. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and please comment to let me know what books you've read recently, if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. And please make sure to subscribe because the support that I've had so far on my videos really means so much. And subscribing, you make sure you won't miss another video from me. I hope you all have a great rest of March and have a great reading month, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!